You've likely heard of the samurai, stoic warriors, clad in layers of lacquered armor, bound to a strict code of honor. Bushidō, the way of the warrior, a code of loyalty. Sacrifice, silence, but tonight, we won't be rushing into battle. We won't speak of flying arrows or clashing swords. Instead, we'll linger in the quiet, in the spaces between war and glory, in the cold mornings, the whispered rituals. The long, still hours. This is not the samurai of legend. This is the samurai of daily struggle, of internal conflict, of quiet obedience. So settle in. Let the hum of history lull you into stillness. And drift with me into a world of structure, silence, and sorrow. Imagine yourself waking before the sun. The tatami beneath you is cold, the room is still, empty, save for a single candle flickering near the door. You are a hatamoto, a low-ranking samurai, bound to your lord. And your code, you have not seen battle, you may never see battle, and yet, each moment of your life is trained for it. You dress slowly, deliberately. The cloth of your kimono rough, but clean. Your two swords, your soul, are laid before you. You do not touch them, not yet. First, you kneel, a silent bow. A breath drawn in, and held, not as a soldier, but as a servant of order, of restraint. Your tasks are mundane, accounting, writing reports, managing rice stipends for other retainers. Bushidō teaches frugality. And so your meals are modest, a bowl of rice, pickled vegetables, tea. No indulgence, no complaint. Even in hunger, there is honor. You were born into this class, but it does not guarantee ease. In fact, many samurai lived on the brink of poverty, unable to farm, forbidden from trade. Their pride forbade labor, their status forbade wealth. So you recite poetry to no one, practice calligraphy, sharpen a sword you may never use. The day moves slowly, the rhythm of your life is one of repetition, of waiting, of discipline for discipline's sake. You are not expected to feel, not to laugh too loudly, nor grieve too openly, to speak only when spoken to bow when unseen, to die, if ordered. And all the while, the code remains. Bushidō, invisible, yet inescapable, a whisper behind every movement. Every breath, not for glory, but for control. Let us shift now, from the quiet room of the anonymous samurai, to the life of one whose name you may have heard. Seigo Takamori, often called the last true samurai, but before he became a legend, he was just a boy, born in 1828, in the southern Satsuma domain of Japan. He was not born into power. His family, though samurai, were poor. Like so many, he lived a life shaped not by choice, but by duty. As a young man, Seigo served his domain with quiet resolve. He was not particularly ambitious, but he was known for loyalty, and for the stillness with which he followed orders. Even when they broke his heart, in 1858, his lord was exiled, and Seigo, ever obedient, followed him into banishment. He lived on a distant island for years, enduring isolation, sickness, and repeated attempts at suicide. But still, he remained devoted. Later, as Japan modernized during the Meiji Restoration, Seigo helped overthrow the shogunate. He fought, not for power, but for a version of honor he believed was slipping away. A world of clarity, of structure, of sacrifice. But soon, even he was out of place. The Meiji state had no room for old codes. Samurai were stripped of their swords and their stipends. and the code that had ruled Seigo's life was fading. In 1877, he led the Satsuma Rebellion, a doomed uprising. It was not born of rage, but of sorrow, at the Battle of Shiroyama. His small force of samurai faced Japan's new imperial army, modern rifles against ancient blades. He knew he would lose, but he could not stand by. To him, Bushidō demanded action, even if it meant death. He was wounded, and it said, though not confirmed, that he chose seppuku, the ritual suicide of the samurai. It was not a loud end, not heroic in the cinematic sense, but quiet, personal, final, and so, the man who had once helped shape a modern Japan was undone by the very code he could not abandon. Seigo Takamori is still revered today. Statues stand in his memory, films bear his name, but the true weight of his life was not in battle, but in the burden he carried, the silence he maintained, the code he obeyed. Now, we step away from the sword, away from the man, and into the shadowy corridors of memory, where the truth of Bushidō becomes something harder to grasp. You see, the word Bushidō, the way of the warrior, was rarely spoken aloud during much of the samurai era. It wasn't etched into tablets or written in official codes. It lingered more as an idea, unspoken, but expected. In the Sengoku period, when warlords ruled fractured provinces, samurai often lived brutal, practical lives. They fought when told, they served those who paid. There was loyalty, yes, but also betrayal, ambition, survival. Bushidō, as we know it today, is not a mirror, but a painting, one created long after the battles had ended. Its most famous articulation came not in the Age of Swords, but centuries later, in 1900, in a book written in English, Bushidō, The Soul of Japan by Inazu Nitobe. Nitobe was not a samurai, he was a Christian scholar, educated abroad, trying to explain Japanese ethics to a Western world. He wrote of loyalty, honor, frugality, courage, and in doing so, he gave the samurai a code they had never fully possessed, the Bushidō of popular culture. The stoic, noble warrior was born not from scrolls, but from stories. Later, during times of war, the image of the samurai became useful. The government invoked Bushidō to inspire soldiers, to demand obedience, to justify sacrifice. The ideal was romantic, the reality more silent. Modern scholars debate, was Bushidō real, or was it constructed to serve the needs of different ages? What we know is this: for many samurai, life was a contradiction, expected to be both gentle and deadly, cultured and violent, obedient and self-determined. The true mystery of Bushidō is not in whether it existed, but in how it quietly rewrote history, turning discipline into destiny and silence into virtue. Now, let us look outward, beyond the silent corridors of samurai homes, to the villages, markets, and muddy roads of feudal Japan, to the lives that moved around and beneath the warrior class. In this rigid society, the samurai sat atop a carefully structured hierarchy, above peasants, artisans, and merchants, and yet, many samurai lived lives more difficult than those they looked down upon. Peasants toiled in the fields, their lives were grueling, shaped by weather, taxes, and famine. But they could farm, they could trade, their labor, though hard, could feed them. Samurai could not farm. They were warriors, bound to their lord, and when peace stretched on, They often found themselves idle and poor. Merchants, though ranked lowest, often became wealthy, but wealth was not honor, and so the samurai watched as shopkeepers prospered, while they polished swords they could not sell, and wrote poetry to ease a quiet hunger. The contradiction was clear, but never voiced. To break from the code was to lose one's name, to bend toward practicality was to live in shame, and so many samurai suffered quietly, wearing worn robes, borrowing rice, sleeping in rooms too small for their pride. There were samurai who taught, who guarded gates, who served in silence. The myth of the sword masked the reality of the bowl, of the debt, of the fear. Still, they bowed. Still, they obeyed. Still, they carried the weight of a code written not in law, but in expectation, and for those beneath them. The peasants, the merchants, the craftsmen, the samurai were both admired and resented, symbols of something long gone and something still pressing down. This was the silent tension of Edo life, a society bound not just by order, but by image, and a warrior's mask that could never be removed. As we close this journey through the samurai's world, imagine once more the stillness of a quiet room, the faint glow of a candle, the soft rustle of kimono fabric. The samurai code, Bushidō, was never just about battle. It was a life carefully measured in silence, a constant balancing of duty and desire, pride and poverty. Though the swords have long been sheathed, and the castles have crumbled to earth, the echoes of that discipline linger, a reminder that behind every legend, there is a story of quiet endurance, of hardship borne without complaint, and of a world shaped by unseen struggles. So as you lie back now, allow your thoughts to drift, like cherry blossoms floating gently on a breeze. Feel the weight of history lighten, and your breath slow, and your body relax. The samurai's way, though distant in timer, invites us to pause, to listen, and to rest. Good night.